Today, I wanted to show you guys how I gravity bleed my Shimano brakes, where no syringe is required. And hopefully this will help you whenever you need to go bleed your brakes. Let's go ahead and jump right into this with all the parts and pieces you'll need to get this job done. These are all the items that I use whenever I do a gravity bleed on my Shimano brakes. I use a 9/32 wrench to open up the bleed valve. I use hydraulic mineral oil specifically made for Shimano. I use a plastic tube to connect to the bleed valve. I use a Shimano little bucket that connects to the actual brake lever itself. And then if I need new brake pads, I'll go ahead and put them on at this particular time. I recommend using a glove to protect your hands from any of the chemicals. I recommend having a rag and some rubbing alcohol. If you can put this in a spray bottle, it makes it a little bit easier, but it's not necessary. And then I use a bucket whenever I'm doing the bleed. That way the oil just goes down in there. There's no need to actually have a syringe with this particular type of bleed. I find this to be a little bit easier and I have a lot more success with it in the long run. So let's get to it. First thing you're going to want to do is remove your tire from your bike because you don't want any of the mineral oil to actually get on the disc itself. So I'll just simply remove that. The next step, now that we've got the tire off, is just simply remove your brake pads. This is different for all different types of models of brakes. On mine, it just uses this little cotter pin and then just pull that out. Before you take your pads out, what you can do is you can take your screwdriver and you can push those pistons back in using the pads. You can actually get a block that will help you with this. All the times that I have ever done it, I have found that this works just as easily. Most of the time you're replacing your pads anyways. Okay, now that we've done that, we can pull the brake pads out. The next thing you're going to want to do is level out your brake handle, because whenever we bleed this, we want this screw here to be level. Now that we've got that level, we can simply open up the bleed port on the top of the handle. Now we're ready to put on the little Shimano bleed cup. Now you don't want to thread this on too tight. It just goes on about like that, not even really snug. Leave this little piece in. Now that we've got our little cup on there and we've got this little stopper put in place, we can go ahead and add our Shimano mineral oil. What I do is I just put a decent amount in here. What we're going to do at this point, this should be enough to flush all the way through the lines. These lines really don't hold a lot, especially this front brake. So just fill it up just like that and leave that oil where it's available to where you can get to it real easily. All right, now we're ready to do the actual gravity bleed itself. So you'll want to get your bucket and set that down below your bike. You're going to want to have that little tube, and that tube is going to connect right here to the bleed valve. So what I like to do is I like to use the non-open-ended side of a wrench and then just slip that on that nut just like that, and then put the bleed valve tube on the top of the bleed valve. Now this tube isn't long enough to get down to the bucket, so you can either lower your bike on your bike stand or you can just hold this up there just like that. Once it starts bleeding, it'll just drip straight down into that bucket. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to open this slowly. Then eventually you will see fluid start to come out of here. Don't unscrew this valve all the way because it will come off and you'll have a bigger problem. Now we can pull this little cap, and we're going to want to make sure that this never gets empty because we don't want any air to get into the system. So just spin this around, and then eventually that will come off, and you can set this aside and that will start to drain down in there, and then you can just add more fluid as needed. As you can see, it starts to drip out of there into our bucket down here. This is a much slower process than if you had a syringe. I find this to be just a little bit easier and I've had the best luck with this compared to doing a syringe bleed. Okay, this is looking good. I haven't gotten any bubbles out, and the fluid looks nice and clean. It looks like new fluid that has come through there. What you're gonna wanna do is you're just gonna wanna close this bleed valve, but be aware that this is gonna probably still drip just a little bit, so make sure it's over your bucket. All right, once you've got that closed, what I like to do is just bring this up and drop that in there. You want to make sure that you don't get any of this mineral oil on the caliper, and then we're going to want to clean this with alcohol just to make sure before we put our brake pads back in. Okay, now let's just take a little bit of rubbing alcohol, put it on a towel, or you can spray it, and then just wipe off all the areas that are on your bike that might have had mineral oil touching it. All right, there we go. We're ready to install the brake pads again, but we'll just take these and we'll slip them back in here, just like this. However yours connect, mine just use this pin. Just want to bend this back just so it doesn't fall out. Just like that. Okay, now that we've got the tire back on, we're ready to do the lever bleed. These are really easy. You just have to have the fluid inside the little cup, take out the little stopper, and then you're just gonna simply just pump your lever, and then you're gonna see bubbles come out. Once all the bubbles are done, you can simply just take this and cap this off again, just like that. And then you're ready to remove the bucket. And this is why it's important to have this thing as level as you can get it, because whenever you remove that, you want to make sure that none of the fluid comes out. Just screw this cap back on and just clean up your lever really well with rubbing alcohol. Now you're set. Now your lever should feel really good. And that's all it takes to gravity bleed your Shimano brakes. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. Let me know, have you done a gravity bleed before versus using a syringe? Or do you prefer to use the syringe method? Also, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. It really helps out my channel. And as always, get out there, run, bike, build, and just have fun. We'll see you in the next one.